Thanks, man. Appreciate it. It's great to be here. We were just saying I haven't been here in like 4 years.
4 years, yeah.
A lot has changed. And I think we talked about this last time we were here, but I do want to talk about how you got started in all this and some of, because you're at a pretty serious place now. So how did you come about being here in this building, and then what was your process leading up to it?
Okay. Well, yeah, I first started recording like I think a lot of people do when they get into any kind of music stuff, and that's when you're a teenager.
Yeah.
And eventually I started to turn the basement of my mom's house into basically like a do-it-yourself recording studio, and I had a Tascam, just like what you bought, but I had the 8-track version.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
So I had one of those.
Sorry,
and just like
can I ask what year would that be? You mind if I ask that?
I could give you
What
an
era?
age. I think
what album was number one?
Well, I think the first album I ever did was for a band called The Wayouts.
Okay.
And they were like a punk rock band.
Yeah.
So that I do remember, and I would actually love to hear that again.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I was down there, just a handful of like dynamic mics, and it was a great, sort of great like opportunity for me to just sort of get my hands dirty. It was all just like just drawn into it. It would be like, oh, I read this book and it said that you do this to accomplish this, or like this is how you record bass, or this is how you can help mix drums, and renting gear, buying new pedals just to figure out what
So you were
a
reading
phaser
that?
does, or
You're reading that in a book, not a forum.
That's how old I am. Yeah, yeah.
Hey, I'm with you.
Yeah, there was no like Pensado's place or Mix with the Masters. There was, you go to the music store and you hope that they have like a home recording. I think it was like Home Recording Engineer's Guide to
Nice.
mixing and that kind of stuff, or like Home Recording Engineer's Guide to Engineering. So those are the types of books that I'd be looking through, and it would obviously be supplemented with every magazine I could possibly get my hands on that talked about anything to deal with mics. Originally I started playing drums, and I was in a couple bands, and I still really like drums, and I really loved drums at that time. But I was never really all that turned on by the live aspect of it. Like for me, I was always drawn to the production thing. I didn't know it. I couldn't define it at that time.
Yeah.
But I was way more of a nerd. I wasn't the one that needed to be in front of an audience and was like really excited about playing for X amount of people and playing different venues. Like it was fun that I got to tag along for those things.
Yeah.
But that wasn't what I was about.
Is it because you liked records?
Yeah, I loved records. I loved records, and I also just liked tinkering. Like I love, messing around with electronics and trying to understand the process. Like for me, now that we've already hit on this, that's always been one of the biggest motivators for me, is like really, really loving process and really, really loving to problem solve.
Yeah.
And for me, whether it was like being a really young kid and playing with a bunch of Legos and trying to build something, or it was me at 13 playing with a bunch of microphones and recording different instruments and trying to see what I could build with that, that's always been that's what's intrinsically rewarding to me. And that's always been what I've been really motivated by.
Right.
It's getting that satisfaction that you're like, you've accomplished something, you've done something new, you've learned. Most of the coolest shit that I've heard has been like, a lot of my favorite guys are guys that do things that are unconventional.
Yeah.
And, a lot of people will say, oh, you're not supposed to use this mic. And then all of a sudden somebody does it, and then it creates a trend.
Yeah.
I think that when you do those things, you need to be very aware of the way that you're experimenting. I said it recently in another interview, but and I'm not at all a Steve Albini fan for the most part.
Okay.
I kind of think he's a bit of a, whatever. But
he's not watching.
He's not watching. I don't want him to show up at my door in his overalls and tell me I don't know what he'd tell me. Probably something long-winded. Yeah. But he did say something that I really appreciated. And he said, if you're experimenting and you get some interesting results, but at the end of it, you don't know why you got those results, it's ultimately a waste of time. And I don't think that's entirely true, but I think that's probably a good 80% true. And I think that the point of experimenting and pushing boundaries and trying new things is that if you do learn from it, then you might be able to develop a new process that isn't being used. Yeah. And there's lots of people that break rules in music, and that's a part of what it's about. And that's a part of the reason why I got into making music was, like I got into it DIY, do it yourself. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, so it wasn't, I ended up working at another studio further down the line, and I ended up getting mentored further down the line. But I got into music originally, satisfying, that desire just to learn and experiment. That's not to say that a lot of those things I would never do again, but they definitely, I think that spirit is still very true in what I do. But as far as like whether I actually, like Albini would say, like, did you really get anything out of that experience? And it was like, well, probably not out of most of my experimenting, but I definitely learned a lot about, running cables and starting to get signal lines and how line amplifiers, like the signal chain of a console and all those types of things I started to wrap my head around.
That's cool. Just to break up your timeline for a sec, is there something like experimental that you tried recently in this era that you now go to a lot?
Yeah, I'm not even sure
Some
the
tricks
barometer of it.
Are free to share.
Yeah, I think.
Actually, sorry again, I'm interrupting you this whole time.
Yeah, no,
I want to
go
talk
for it.
about this, but you've been posting pictures about those art tube.
Okay, there's
preamps.
one. Yeah, they're $40.
Yeah, and everybody shits on
$30, and they're horrible. They're absolutely horrible. But I think they're one of the coolest little tube distortion boxes that you can use. So there's an example of that. Is that here I have all this gear worth a bunch of money, and at the end of the day, I might run my drums through a pair of these art preamps that are considered to be, junk.
Yeah.
Maybe that is true, but at the same time, I think that if you, and this is one of the things with experimenting is that, you really got to think about it in a broader spectrum, because lots of people will run a bass through a bass pedal that's $50 and not think twice about it.
Right.
So why the hell is it all of a sudden this big deal that I want to run my drums through a $40 preamp with a tube in it? It's just an overdrive. But yeah, I just think it sounds cool. At the end of the day, it was sort of my poor man's culture vulture.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like that was sort of it, is I really got attached to a culture vulture, but I never ended up pulling the trigger and buying one. But I still wanted to be able to distort certain things using the tubes. And I was like, I don't need all those features. I just want to overdrive a tube, basically. And that basic circuit is no different than what's in a, people will run vocals through a guitar amp, or people will run drums through a guitar amp. Right. That circuit that's on that little art isn't like totally foreign than like the basic circuit that you would find on like a national amp that might be your vocal sound for a record. Right. So for me,
are you using them in tracking or mixing?
I'll never use them for tracking.
Okay.
I'm not, the only reason that I wouldn't, and I do use them for mixing, the only reason, actually I have used them for tracking if I set up an auxiliary mic that's really overdriven. Yeah. And I think they sound cool. But the only reason that I wouldn't do that during the tracking phase is that I just wouldn't want to paint myself in the corner. Right. You know what I mean? So if I do it in tracking, I would multi off of that, and I would have my cover your ass line, and then I would have my, maybe this will sound really cool. Yeah. Yeah. So I kind of put music aside, and I didn't really follow it that much. And about 4 years into being at McMaster, I ended up, I went to a Wax Mannequin show at Catherine North. Okay. And it was this like live, we're going to make a record out of this live performance, Wax Mannequin performance. And I walked into that room and I saw all this great gear, and I met Dan Aiken and Glenn Marshall, and I started talking to them. And everything that I was stoked on as a child or as a young teenager came back. And I was like, I've spent the last 4 years hating everything that I've been doing. Yeah. And I just walked into this room and I feel like I belong here. Yeah. Like, this is what awesome. I want to be doing. That's cool. So I ended up talking to Dan a little bit, and a couple months went by, and then finally I started to intern there every once in a while. And, by the end of it, I was there every day, and I was skipping all of my classes. And, I would take a break. I would be like, Dan, I gotta spend a week and write 2 papers. 2 papers, yeah. You know what I mean? Were you getting credit for the internship, or was it just? No. It was just, I didn't even know what was going to come of it at that point. I just was like, this is what I love. Everything about this I love. So yeah, and then, that cruised along for, must have been 3 or 4 years that I was there. So that was really cool. getting to work with Dan was really great. And then Glenn and I started to hit it off because Glenn was a little bit more pushing boundaries in my mind and sort of like pushing boundaries. And that's the way I sort of perceived it. And I was like, you know, so many records like Tom Waits' Bone Machine in particular was like such an influential record to me. So when I was working with Glenn, I sort of got that sense of like, this is live playing and people are breaking rules and doing cool things.
Right.
And you know, nobody's getting too uptight. This doesn't feel like an LA session. This feels like more the way I perceive avant-garde artists working.
Yeah.
So him and Dan had a falling out. And Glenn and I decided to open up a studio, which was Vibe Wrangler. And the first incarnation of Vibe Wrangler was at 270 Sherman, which is I forget what they call it now, but anyway, that giant art space there.
Okay.
So we opened up a studio there. And
the Cotton
Center.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So we were there for maybe about 4 or 5 months. And unbeknownst to us, the landlord just decided to put a transformer in our space. And I think we basically just like moved the next week. We were like, well, we can't do this. There's this giant hum going on, just like constant hum. So we left. And I think things are a lot better there. But when we were there, that property manager was just awful. And so we left. And then we ended up going to the Cumberland spaces. Jeremy Freiberger had been working with the owner of the building named Spiro Danielos. And we moved Vibe Wrangler into there. The difficulty with it is that, you know, at the end of the day, Glenn and I just, we had a falling out.
Sure.
And the overhead of that space with the two of us producing every record just wasn't working out. And the space itself kind of had some shortcomings that I needed to kind of, you know, like I went really big with it. And if I had another, you know, $150,000, I probably could have got that room exactly the way that I would have wanted it. But that amount of money at that time just was not in the cards.
Of course.
So we kind of bit off a little bit more than we could chew.
I'm surprised when people share spaces. I don't know how, you know, you've mentioned a couple falling outs, but like, I don't understand how people, I mean, they're over right there now, Boxcar, that they've got 3 guys there. I just don't understand how people do it. It's a real special dynamic you got to have.
Yeah, it's very special.
I don't know how it works.
And they work on each other's stuff and everybody helps everybody out. I'm really glad those guys are there and using the space because, you know, I worked in particular really hard and I invested a lot of money to make that place happen. And, you know, I had to walk away from it. I was just sort of like, I wanted a clean slate.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, I wanted a clean slate. I wanted a place that would have a business model that would allow me to pay my mortgage and all that kind of stuff. And we had lost so much money there that it was a good learning experience, but that was where it kind of ended.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then I moved into here.
And when was that?
4 or 5 years ago.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's a great place, and this has evolved a lot too.
Tons.
So you've been just slowly, because I guess when I was first here, it was pretty new for you.
Yeah.
So you've been just, I know that this section has changed, which we'll head over to shortly, but then this area even just feels like where I'm sitting feels deader than out there.
Oh, much deader.
So is everything here pretty specific to?
Yeah. I mean, that was one of the things this isn't a big space by any means, right? Mm-hmm. And that was, to be honest with you, something that I was quite excited about because
it's not small though.
Well, no, it's not. I mean, it's still 800 square feet or something. But the Vibe Wrangler boxcar was like 2,300 square feet.
Yeah.
And, you know, one of my problems with that space at the time was just like, you know, no matter where you set up a mic or whatever, it was a room mic. You know, you put it 2 inches away from an acoustic guitar and you use a condenser, it sounds like a room mic. Yeah. So you really needed to be, you were either blessed by the room or it was a real struggle.
Right.
And that's what I found. Yeah. I'm sure they found ways to work around that, but that's what I found. So when I came here, I really wanted things to be tighter. I really wanted to be able to manipulate sounds a lot. So if I did record a drum set, that I could record them and I could distort the hell out of them, but it didn't turn into soup. You know what I mean? I'd be able to really manipulate samples, or I'd be able to manipulate a mic that was really only picking up the information that was right in front of it. So I wanted a smaller dead room so that I could be more aggressive with the backhand manipulating.
Nice.
And that's sort of how this space was sort of designed.
Has the mindset of bands changed? Because I remember before I knew anything about studios or gear, I would think if I'm going to pay any amount of money, I want to be in a massive room. I want to look like I'm the Beatles or something and record. Has the mindset changed where they think, no, this is a cool space, I want to stay here?
I can't figure that out, actually.
Yeah?
Yeah, because I think in certain instances, you're getting people that don't really care. They care about certain things. Often, like there's certain people that are in the camp of, we don't care what you use. We've heard these other records. If you can get us from A to B that way, that's completely
And those
fine.
are great clients.
Those are great. Yeah. We're trusting you to design a process, to do all this stuff. You work it out. And we're going to trust you. I think there's other people that, are of the mindset that are sort of like what you described. And it's like, well, we're making this record and we're really making a go at it right now. And this is going to be our attempt to really kind of get into the music industry or create our next record that's going to be really important. And so, they sort of like, I feel that's just sort of like, well, you've seen other people do that, so you just feel that's a sort of safe bet. So you feel like for you to succeed, you need to do the exact same things that these other people have done to succeed. Yeah. And then I think there's other people that are like, actually, everything that's in this room is perfect. Yeah. So, and I've dealt with everybody, a total cross section of everything. I think at this point now, most people come into this room and they're like, well, you have better gear than most of the bigger rooms. Like, you know what I mean? So it's not as much of a...
And your records too. And I really wanted to kind of start off with this too. But I think I've said this to you before, and I'm not just saying this because the cameras are going, but you're making I think some of the best music I've heard in this country. Like, it's just, really appreciate that. I think last time I said province, but it's great, man. And we're going to post some links, but New Hands, that was an incredible record. I got to talk to Troy because I just recently got into that Sunset EP because it came out. That EP. That is incredible. I wish it was twice as long, but that came out, I think, around Christmas time, and I just missed it. And just recently, I grabbed it, and that's such an incredible record, and you did that. So we're going to post some links to some of the stuff from Medicine Hat as well. That new song is huge. Somebody told me, I can't remember, somebody was saying they think it's your best work, the Medicine Hat track. I can't remember who said that. Yeah. Somebody said it. It is great, but I can't remember who we were talking to, but somebody said that. But that's some incredible stuff. So really, the bands just need to see your Instagram, see this room, see the vibe, and then listen to those tracks, right?
Yeah.
Are the genres of people contacting you starting to narrow? Because there is kind of a sound, I find, that's coming out of it.
Yeah, I think there is to a degree. I think, I'm pretty open-minded with things, and I like to, whether you call it postmodernism or you just like to, sort of combine different ideas. And I think that's a very, sort of 2016 or even 2000s on. I grew up listening to a lot of hip hop, right? Okay. So for me, the idea of cross-pollinating or cross-genres was just sort of like a thing you did.
Just what it is.
It was just an inherent thing. There wasn't anything groundbreaking about it. For me, it was like, oh, that sounds cool with that. Let's just roll with it. You know what I mean? Oh, that sample of some kind of Miles Davis thing getting sliced up, and then there's an 808 kick under it. That just sounds cool. Right. And then somebody's rapping on it. So now you have these three very separate things just kind of getting smashed together, but then there's this new aesthetic that just felt right. And that's what's always driven me. So I think that if there is one thing that tends to be unifying a lot of the people that I work with, is that willingness to sort of step out of comfort zones and try new things and start to, make sure that you're not being too predetermined in what your end goal is. I do work on a lot of sessions and a lot of records where people are just sort of want me for that specific skill set. Right. Mike, we're hiring on you to do this, this, and this, and that's fine. In fact, I love doing those types of things. And then there's things like, New Hands, Illatry, and Medicine Hat in particular, were things where, we really, on all those records, really, really pushed ourselves. And revisited things and tried things for days and then threw them out. So as far as whether things are kind of streaming into a certain thing, I think at the end of the day, generally it's indie rock to some degree,
Well,
but the
yeah.
Illitree stuff is completely electro.
Mm-hmm.
But then again, it's also like, I remember talking to Troy and being like, I don't know, I just think this should kind of be like a shoegaze record with like trap beats. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
With you kind of singing with a vocoder on top of it.
Yeah.
And then we started fucking around with that idea.
Yeah.
And that was, of course, like it was informed. Like we're passing the baton back and forth.
Right.
But at a certain point, I just kind of had like this is what's going on. This is how I would call it. Like, let's just start following that.
Yeah. There really isn't that much. I don't think people use genres anymore.
I don't think that was relevant for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Going back to that's really cool. Going back to that thought of you guys' work being kind of like an extra member of the band, do bands take convincing if
tons of
the
time.
result, if the result is different from what they had imagined?
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah. Some bands easier than other. Illitree is a difficult one. Me and Troy argued a lot, and I think that was really healthy and good. You know, both of those situations were people that, like, I remember originally meeting with New Hands, and they were like, we don't even really need a producer. And then by the end of it, they were like, you know, I remember talking to one of the members and him being like, well, the band's kind of like a trifecta. And you got your producer, and you got, you know what I mean? So it went completely the other way once they started to understand and comprehend what it is. And I think that from a band's perspective, in many instances, there's fear that somebody will be in a control position without understanding what's going on. And I think there's also the idea that they have it all figured out, right? Particularly with younger bands. So there's those two things that are going on. So is there a gray period? Is there this? There's a period that you got to go through and gain their trust. Right.
And they don't know that they could sound better.
They don't know that.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Like it depends. Like with the Medicine Hat, you know, we recorded the beds in a fairly conventional way, but there were certain things that I was pushing for. But then as the conversations went on, and in particular with like sort of Mike and Tyler, I just started going, you know, like, I think we really need to be outside the box, and I'm sort of hearing this and this. And they heard it. They got it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So by that point, there were certain times where they were, you know, telling me that I was being boring. You know what I mean? So I was getting it thrown back at me.
That's cool.
Which is cool.
Yeah.
So, but that's probably one of the most, you know, easygoing situations where we've done something that I think is quality and is something that's different. In certain situations, if it's in the tracking, like, you know, the words, "If this sucks, I'll pay for it," has come out of my mouth.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like if I really believe in an idea and we're on the clock, you know, I'll be like, you know, like, listen, I want to try a bunch of things, but if this doesn't work, we can do another evening on me. And you know what I mean? Like and that's just the trust thing. Like it's like, no, I'm on board. I really want this to be good.
That's cool.
I hear it this way. And if my ideas are horrible and nobody's into it, no ego, we just keep moving.
Yeah.
I'll probably still say a bunch of other things. And if we got to go down this road again, you guys got to deal with that.
Yeah.
Like I'm still going to try to push things. But at the same time, if I eat up your money with my bad ideas,
that's cool. That's cool.
Then you don't, you know, then I'll pay for it.
Yeah.
When it comes to mixing, I do the inverse of that, where I always track by the hour, but mixing, I charge a stock fee. Okay. And the reason I do that is because I don't want anybody breathing down my neck when I'm doing it.
Right.
And I don't mind spending more time.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I also would like to do it to a certain degree with an amount of comfort and without any eyes or ears on me.
So you mix without the band?
I start.
You start it. Yeah.
I start it. I never finish it without the band.
Right.
Because at the end of the day, it's their record.
Sure.
And at the end of the day, I feel like I'm going crazy and I don't know if this is good or not. And I need other people's input.
Yeah.
So I, you know, it's always a team thing. Like that's always a big part of the way that I work with records. But the first couple days, like the last thing I want is for the band to be present when I start, like, you know, I start pitching down a vocal or I start like adding...
or chopping up a drum track.
Chopping up drum tracks and reversing shit or like adding some weird reverbs at these moments. And the last thing I need is for them to sit here for 2 hours going, everything Mike's done for the last 2 hours sounds really shitty.
Yeah.
You know, I don't need that. They don't need that. I don't need that. I need to spend my time getting used to the tracks, making a ton of mistakes, making a ton of bad sounding decisions. And then eventually out of that, I'll start to get things that I think are sounding pretty cool.
You know, it's funny that I realize too is that a lot of musicians, artists, they're not trained to know what not to listen to. Yeah. And I'll send someone a mix just so that they can hear. I'll send someone just a rough bounce so that they can hear the drums are in time with the bass. And they'll be like, man, that acoustic sounds really muddy.
Yeah, it's not about that right now.
Yeah. And so I've learned, like, I need to send a huge note. Just listen to these two things. Yeah. Well, let's sure. Get up and take a look around. I'm eager to look at all this stuff. All right. This is like, I've said this before, and I've been following you on Instagram probably even before I met you. And the crazy thing is that a lot of studios are on Instagram, and we're all just looking at everybody's gear. And
yeah, it's fun.
It's so much fun. So first of all, I noticed the desk. This is new from what I've seen. You had this installed recently?
3 weeks ago? A month ago? A month ago? Yeah.
Was it custom made or?
No, it's not. It's like it's a company called Sterling. Okay. And they're not Sterling Audio like the mastering places. Right. But they do outfit all their studios. Okay. So there is like a some kind of connection, but they're not the same one. But yeah, I had been trying to figure out a way to work for a while that suited the way that I work, which is like a very, what they call hybrid. Mm-hmm. And I, was thinking about building a desk or whatever, and then I saw this, and oddly enough, every time I looked at a mastering studio, I looked at the way they work, and I was like, well, why wouldn't you want to be mastering engineers in their desk, and the whole setup is the most optimal way to listen to music. Yeah. So why wouldn't I want to mix that way? Interesting. And then I started thinking about the gear collection and the whole thing, and then I just started. I do have a fair amount of hardware, but like I still use the computer a ton. And I really didn't want anything to be, I didn't want my speakers to have to be in these weird spots because of the gear. And I really wanted to get as little reflections as possible. I just wanted it to, like at the end of the day, I sort of set this up where I was like, okay, what's the best way to do this? And it would just be me sitting at the speakers. Okay, so now how do I set up my gear around this situation so that I'm hearing as well as I possibly can? And this was that solution. So the idea is that you can tweak something but still stay right there in the mix. Yeah, I barely ever have to move. Yeah, that's awesome. Unless I'm working with the tape machine, I don't move more than a couple inches. That's really cool. So show me what you got right from the top here. Okay. Lexicon? Yeah, so an old Lexicon PCM 60. Mm-hmm. It's a great older digital reverb. It's the live version of the PCM 70. Okay. So it's the same basic circuit, same basic idea as actually like the 224. Okay. Which I used to own one, but I sold it. But yeah, so it's just a great old Lexicon reverb. It sounds pretty grainy and dirty. I use it on snare drums and. Is it stereo or? It's mono and stereo out. Okay. Okay. And vocals a lot. It gets used on vocals a lot. So that's cool. Yep. Yeah. And then, sorry, do you do any of that in tracking, or is that with that? Never track with reverb. That makes sense. Yeah. And the LA2A. So is this something you built? Yeah. No, I didn't build this. Okay. A couple people actually had their hand in it, but it's a Drip Audio LA2A. Oh yeah. Like a kit. Yeah, it's a kit, and I had done a lot of research and talked to friends of mine that had built drip kits, and they were all really big fans of it. And guys that had built the Drip Pultec, but actually owned two Pultecs. Oh. And they were like, the Drip Pultec's amazing. Really? And guys that had a Drip LA2A and owned LA2As, and they're like, well, we use the Drip more than we use our actual ones. So the nice thing about the Drip is that if you build it to their max specs, like get the best tubes, the best caps, like all that stuff. Yeah. It's a really serious piece. Like I think I've invested almost $2,000 in parts in that thing. Wow. You know what I mean? So whereas like an actual LA2A is like 25, the Teletronix. Yeah, you're pretty close. Yeah. So that's just cool. In parts. And I love it. It gets used constantly on, vocal. Every vocal goes through there. Bass usually goes through there. So was it a bigger undertaking than you had expected? Oh, I couldn't put that together. Yeah. No, that's a pretty serious build. They look nice. Yeah. They look really cool. And is that mostly vocals? Almost always. Yeah. Vocals and bass.
that. That's cool.
Yep.
I see a lot of these, and I remember when you got it. Can you explain it to me? Because I honestly don't really understand it.
Okay, so this is the SSL X Logic, X-Desk. It is the back end of their, so this piece here and that piece there are your faders and effect sends and your input trim of, I believe it's their AWS series.
Okay.
So the AWS series, which retail for like, about 60, 70 grand, basically what they've done is they've chopped off the EQs, they've chopped off the compressors, they've chopped off your bus routing, and this is what you're left with.
Oh, okay.
So it's the same sonic circuit as that, but it's a summing box ultimately. But each channel has an insert. So you can basically build your own custom console. Like if I wanted this to look more the part, these two pieces would be on top of each other, and then I would have, two 10-channel 500 series on top of that, one for EQs and one for compressors.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And then that would basically give you your custom SSL console.
Yeah.
And that's slowly what I'm building.
Oh, that's cool.
But yeah, so instead of investing and saying, yes, I want an SSL compressor and EQ on each channel, you're like, well, I don't know what I want. Maybe I want an API one, or I want to do something else.
Yeah.
You can customize your build to whatever you want.
So you'll track through here?
No.
Sorry. Okay.
So this is only for monitoring.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And mixing?
Mixing, yeah.
Right. Okay.
Sorry, mixing.
And yeah. Okay.
Like, so yeah,
That's
so
cool.
when I'm tracking, if I'm tracking off the tape machine, like I can use this thing without the computer and run a session just off my tape machine, and then I'll be monitoring down the speakers and sending headphone mixes to the band. So this has like effect sends. It has your headphone sends. It has like a master bus insert. It also has this, which is a really cool feature. It has a parallel for your mix insert, so you can squash the hell out of it with like a G-comp.
And you put this on here, yeah.
And then, but actually just sort of blend that in.
Oh,
so you can do parallel like master bus processing. And then it's got effect sends and faders on everything and a talkback mic and all that. So, but it sounds fantastic. That was my thing, is that the entry point wasn't crazy. It was like $4,000 for this. And it was 4,000, but then it starts to add up. Then there's 8,000. And if you actually start doing the math, then you're like, but if I were to add an EQ to each one of those channels, that's another $1,000 on each channel.
Yeah, for sure.
So you can kind of understand that there's no compromises on it, but it's just a very simple design.
Yeah. No, that's cool.
And I love it. I was working in the box for ages, and I wanted to try something else. And then I started working with this thing, and immediately I was like, this just sounds bigger, better, deeper.
That's cool.
And it's super flexible.
So if you're summing then, what would go on the 8 channels?
Oh, the way I normally do it. So this changes all the time, but generally...
Standard band.
Standard. The first 2 channels would be a drum aux. 3 might be 3 and 4 switch between things. They're either my kick and my snare.
Oh, okay.
So I might process them separately, or they might just work in there.
Right.
5 and 6 are almost always guitars, and then 8 or 7 and 8 are vocals and backup vocals.
Right.
In this case, it's just lead vocal on 8.
Okay.
And then over here for this current mix, I think this is my BX10, this is the PCM60, this is the M7, and then 15 and 16 are synths.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, so I guess like you would need the expansion after a while, pretty quickly.
Yeah, once I got more into the hardware effects, I needed a way to return it.
Yeah, for sure.
But that's another cool feature about this that I should mention, is that if you push, so these are the headphone sends, but if I press Alt on each one of these, they become returns.
Oh, okay.
So, and they're separate from the actual channel. So if I press Alt, this turns into an additional fader. So technically, if I wanted to, I wouldn't even need to use this, because this has 16 returns.
Oh, okay.
It's just that, if I get into a situation where I'm mixing and then somebody says, well, actually, I want to re-record that vocal.
Right.
So if I end up using these, then it just becomes a difficult thing where I got to recall everything, and it became too difficult. So that's why I got the Xpanda.
That's cool.
But ultimately,
Yeah,
like, that's the amazing thing
them
about this,
around,
is that
yeah.
all of these too do the same thing. So your 24 channels here, plus your 8 here,
Wow.
so it's 32. If you want this to, it becomes 64 returns.
Wow.
So it's crazy, yeah.
All going through the SSL.
Yeah.
That's cool. Yeah, that's a really cool thing. So I saw this as well, the M7. This is a pretty substantial piece.
Yeah.
So what made you decide to go that route?
It was a couple things. One, I do use plug-in reverbs all the time, but there wasn't one that was like, I wanted a plug-in or I wanted a reverb that would basically allow me to turn any microphone into a room mic in a way.
Yeah.
Just gave me a really natural room sound.
Yeah.
Because again, this isn't a huge studio, so I kind of got to the point where, well, I want this to sound bigger, but the plugins are kind of cutting it.
Yeah.
So what do? Do I build a new studio? Do I start renovating this and try to make this bigger?
Yeah.
Or do I just spend the money on this thing?
Yeah.
And I started weighing everything out, and I was like, I might as well just spend all the money, get the best reverb that's on the market. And
the reviews were incredible.
They're incredible.
Huge.
Well, because if you think about it, this thing has the power of 4 Apollos.
Sorry, Jay.
Like,
really?
It's got 16 shark chips in it.
Wow.
So that has 4.
So does this?
And it's only doing reverb.
Wow, man. So does it have a controller, or does it go into the computer in any way?
There's 2 ways to work. Well, there's 3 ways to work it. Right now, I'm just using its front interface. So I got to go through all these menus, and it takes too long. But what I haven't set up yet, but I bought everything for it, is actually just I can plug this in MIDI into my computer, and there's a plugin that will interface with this.
Oh, okay.
So I can save my settings and everything in the plugin, and I can change any parameter in the plugin, but it is changing this hardware piece.
Oh, okay. Otherwise, how do you recall?
You can save and go through banks.
Oh, okay.
But with that one, it's just so simple.
Yeah. Because it's saved in your session, in your Pro Tools session?
You don't save it. No, you have. It's an independent piece of software that's running.
Okay.
But its only function is to go through these menus.
Nice.
In a nice, like, GUI or whatever they call it.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is but you can do it, is they do have like a remote control for it, but it's absurdly expensive.
Oh, really?
It's like $2,500 for this remote.
Wow.
So that wasn't in the cards.
No, for sure. That's a cool piece, though. Yeah, I've heard some samples of it, and I know what you mean. Like, I've been actually just thinking about, like, how can I make like a reverb chamber at home? Like, can I run a speaker into the bathtub or something? Just because maybe I don't have the right reverb plugins, but you do feel like you're missing something for some reason. It just doesn't feel like it has that depth, And
that was it for me. It was like, well, I really like, as I explained earlier, I like really having things tighter, controlled, more dead.
Yeah.
But then there's certain times where if I'm recording somebody playing acoustic guitar and singing, and all of a sudden I bring those tracks up, it's very dead. It's lifeless, of course. So then it's like, well, I need to add some space that will make people convinced that this is in a beautiful room.
Yeah.
And I never got that with an older hardware piece or with a plugin.
Right.
It always sounded just a bit like, it just wasn't right. Whereas that thing, I can throw it on there and I'm like, this sounds better. This sounds like a beautiful room.
Well, and I think, when you're working with indie bands, it's maybe not so necessary, but when you're working with like some great vocalists, like I know you do Jen Budd or Nabby, like you just feel like you need to treat a vocal like that.
Oh, yeah.
Really well.
Yep. And that was it. And, one of the things that kind of was working with Jan, and she did a couple a cappella tunes, and I wanted more options. And I was like driving myself crazy trying to find these plug-in combinations to do this. And I'm like, I've spent way too much time thinking about this. So I spent way too much time trying different combinations, and every time kind of being like let down.
Yeah.
So that's when I just decided, I was like, screw it, I'm going to spend the money. This is way too expensive, but I can't stand working this way anymore. And this deserves to have that sound.
Yeah, so that's cool. The plug-in solution I've been doing right now for Reverb is the Sound Toys stuff. And the new rack that they came out with. Yeah. And they have some presets that will combine a few Echo Boys and a couple other things to create. And so they have some pretty cool space sounds. And it's just the luscious that I've been able to find from a plugin so far. So
I love the Echo Boy stuff. I love the Sound Toys stuff. I use that all the time. for reverb in the box, it's either UAD stuff or more often than not, no, it's the Valhalla.
Yeah, everyone talks about those.
Yeah.
And those are super cheap too, right?
Oh, yeah,
Like
it's,
20 or
I
30
think
bucks or
it's
something.
$60 or
Yeah,
something. Yeah.
yeah.
So there's that, and then there's another one they have that I don't have yet, but I'm going to pick it up probably in the next
So like the
couple days.
vintage Verb?
The vintage Verb.
And then what's the other one? Room something?
There is one other one, but I'm not even sure what it is.
Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah, actually, I demoed one, but I never got a chance to fully listen to it. But I think anytime they do like a survey, that's what people say.
Oh, yeah.
Crazy.
And rightfully so. Like, it sounds fantastic.
Yeah.
And I'm always kind of baffled by that because I don't understand how it's like a single guy that runs the company that does all of that. And I'm like, well, how the hell does Universal Audio that has this gigantic team, then this guy is just doing it on his own in his house.
It's the same as like that, that compressor, the Klangheim MJUC.
And that thing sounds amazing.
Yeah. And it's $29. It's weird. I feel like I'm stealing it. Everybody online is telling that guy, and same with the Valhalla guys, is like charge more.
Yeah,
you should charge more.
Yeah, I'm happy to give you more money, man.
Here's more.
Yeah.
Okay, what's this?
Okay, so that's an interesting piece. So this is a Federal AM 864. So that is an old U.S. military compressor.
Where did you find that?
The guys that run Union out in Toronto, he had one.
Okay.
But it's like an old broadcast compressor that the U.S. military used to use back in, I think, the 50s. So it's built like a tank.
Yeah.
It looks like a tank.
Yeah.
It sounds absolutely fantastic.
Right
Vocals and bass. Yeah, and what's that?
It's just perfect, like where you have a position.
We joked about that when we installed it because it's just so ridiculous. It's just the one knob, like it's a submarine or something. But yeah, we just. I got that a little while ago. We had some fun when we were installing it, obviously, because I made it a centerpiece, partly to take the piss out of myself, but also that just sort of worked with everything else.
What do you use it for?
Bass and vocals almost all the time.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and that's one of the cool things about this is that this is actually like the current, so it almost controls the bias of the tubes. Mm-hmm. So it's almost like the same as when you like deplete the voltage to like a guitar pedal and it starts to get all messed up.
Okay.
You can kind of do the same thing with this. So you can start to get into some pretty cool effects, in terms of tube distortion and whatnot. Yeah. Which I've used quite a bit. So it's great.
And this would be like your input?
Yeah, this is your input and output.
Okay.
And then this is your threshold.
Oh, okay.
So as you can see here, like I'm controlling the current, which is sort of like sucking all the voltage out of the unit, or I can overdrive it. And then if I, kind of really hit it, it gets distorted in a cool way. Do
stuff like this require a lot of maintenance?
This thing, no, because it's the U.S. military.
Right. So it's not like yearly you have to get it like...
No, this thing, I could probably throw it off the roof. No, maybe not. But the funniest thing about this thing is the manual. Oh, yeah? Because there's a manual for it, and it's U.S. military. Really? So everything is like super matter of fact. Right. But there's one section in it that talks about what to do if the enemy might take possession of this. Oh my goodness. And there's how to destroy it. So there's like, use your gun, use a grenade, use an axe, throw it in the rivers. Why? Because we don't want the enemy to have any of our technology. But the best one is, and it's step G, and it just says destroy everything. Oh my! Which is great. So there's no tips on what to do with a Les Paul in it, or how to get a good vocal. No, it doesn't. It tells you how to calibrate. Like actually, but it is pretty technical on everything else. That's amazing. And how to calibrate. So you got the manual as well. Oh, I had to find that online. Oh, yeah. I would love that. They're great. Hard copy? Yeah. That'd be great. That's so funny. That's awesome. And it's so, what's hilarious back then is, maybe it's because of the components, but they were not economical with space at all on those machines. And I love that. I love it. It's so funny. No, it does not need to be 6 units or whatever that is. Yeah, probably. Yeah. Okay, so you've got a set of 500 series here. Yep. Some 550s. Yeah, so those are 550s, not 550As. Oh, okay, so those are the older ones. These are the original ones. Okay, cool. And the difference with those is that the 2520 op amps in them, this EQ has 2 on the input and the output, whereas the 550As only have 1 on the input. Oh, okay. So it's a little bit richer. But they don't make these anymore? No, that's old. Okay.
And what do you use for that? Guitars?
Geez, everything.
Yeah?
Like I'm liking them more and more. Guitars, absolutely. They're a little bit slower sounding and a little bit like darker sounding.
Yeah.
Like even when you boost the highs, it still has like a really nice texture to it.
Yeah.
So if I want a vocal to be a little bit more colored sounding, I'll definitely use those.
Yeah.
As opposed to the other EQs I have, which are way more hi-fi sounding.
Right.
But yeah, like a kick drum, snare drum, guitars, synths, vocal.
Kind of
like,
classic API stuff.
Yeah, it's just an API.
Yeah.
You put it on everything.
Yeah. That's cool. And then I see these a lot as well. What's so special about those?
They're the Mogs, the Q4s. The bands on them are good.
Mm-hmm.
Like the mid band to low band are great. The high end on this and the low end on this is better than pretty much any EQ I've ever used.
Really?
And particularly on a mix.
Okay.
So the reason I got those
And
is
that's
because
on your mix box?
always.
Wow.
Number one, the second you engage it, everything gets better and bigger. And then you can boost a fair amount of high end without ever feeling like it's hurting you.
Right.
Yeah.
That's cool.
They just sound absolutely gorgeous. They were worth every penny, and you'd never take them from me.
Did they just come? I've heard you say that before. Did they come out with like a mastering version, or
Yeah,
they
they
came
do.
out with like a stereo version?
Yeah, they have a stereo. They have a couple different versions. Like see, the thing that's interesting about these is when they originally came out, it was just the high end on 2-channel strips. So you'd have like their preamp, and then you'd have the high end circuit, and that's how they first started doing these.
Oh, okay.
And then he developed the however many bands it is.
Have you used the plug-in version?
No.
Okay. Who does that?
I think
not
it's
universal, is it?
Brainworks or something like that does it. So it's probably
Just
great.
curious. Just curious, yeah. And then what's this here? Is that another EQ?
Yeah, that's another EQ, the Chandler Little Devil.
Okay.
And that thing's awesome too.
Is that kind of an aggressive EQ?
It's more I would almost say it's like right in the middle of these guys in a lot of ways. I haven't gotten, that's the newest EQ that I have.
Yeah.
And because it's mono, it doesn't get used as often as where I would, like if I'm recording piano or something.
I see, okay.
But kick drums and particularly bass guitar, like I think these EQs, they're okay on bass, but this thing like just blows me away. Like I can always carve out what I want. Same with kick drums. Like if I really want to get and really aggressively shape a kick drum, like cut like crazy, but then boost up high end like crazy, and really get aggressive with it. These I felt like I can do whatever I want without ever going like, oh, I'm pushing this too far and it's just starting to sound shitty.
Right.
That thing never lets me down.
And do you try to get the sound pretty close to how you want it in mixing with stuff like bass and kick?
Oh yeah, you mean tracking?
Tracking?
Yeah.
No, but like when you're tracking, do you try to EQ it so that when you come to mixing, you're pretty close?
Yeah, unless I kind of compartmentalize it, right? Like on the one hand, I'll be like, this is ultimately what I'm hearing. But again, I don't want to paint myself into a corner.
Right.
So I'm not going to go so far that if I get into mixing, number one, I listen back and I'm like, I don't like this anymore. Or number two, the band's looking at me going, so can we do this with the kick? And I'm like, no, we can't anymore because I've been so heavy-handed with the tracking.
Yeah, right. That's smart.
Yeah, so that's
cool.
when I always leave room to, like I'll push things a certain way. I'll push it to what's sort of making sense in a more in terms of the fundamentals of the mix. Like there's way too much mids in that kick. I know I won't use those.
Right.
But I won't be like, I really want this to be bombastic in this way, or I really want the snare to be aggressive in the high end. I would never make that decision in tracking. I might start getting inspired at that point, and but I'll put that in the back of my brain. And
yeah.
A
question, because a lot of, I think a lot of like studios that are popping up now, and definitely any home studios, are one-room scenarios without a control room. So how do you dial in like an EQ or a compressor when the drummer's right there?
So I start. It's a two-step process, and I also say this is because I've been working in this room for 5 years, and that was part of the reason why I wanted a one-room situation where I could really learn from it and adapt, and I could know it like the back of my hand. So when I start tracking, I'll have headphones on, and I'll do my preliminary EQing and compressing with headphones. Okay, and then we'll track 45 seconds. Yeah. So you always to tape with drums and beds. So I do my 45 seconds, and then I play back, and I'll listen to all the sounds. I'll do one of two things there. I'll either use a plug-in, okay?
Yeah.
And I'll just go like, oh, I think I want to notch this out.
Yeah.
I don't use that plug-in for the tracking, but that tells me that I need to move this over.
Okay.
Or I
That's
I
cool.
can dig in a little bit more.
Yeah.
Or because I've done this enough, I might actually just go like
You can hear it.
I'm just like, that needs to go.
Yeah. Okay. I was wondering about that. That was something, because I think, like I said, a lot of people are in that scenario, and it would be great to be in a control room and be tweaking it while the drummer's playing live.
And you know, a lot of people say like, you know, it's more time consuming or whatever. And I'm not totally sure that it's more time consuming to walk from the control room all the way to the drum kit and change a thing or whatever. Like, you know, there's so many things that working in one room that save me time. Would I like to be able to be isolated in an instance and then be able to check it out? Yeah. But would I be willing to give up this workflow for that?
Oh, exactly.
Absolutely not.
Not just that, but there's an intimacy too that you get being in the same room. And no, I think there's probably the benefits.
I love it. The other thing I love is that the band never gets too bored.
Yeah.
They can't just start goofing off talking about something.
Yeah.
Everybody's got to be paying attention.
Yeah, exactly.
So there's that pro too. And then, like I said earlier, there's supposed to be a Buzz Audio mastering EQ in there that's getting service. So
Okay, that's cool. Yeah, I've seen that. You got some empty spots here?
Yeah.
What's next?
I don't know. That's why they're covered. So
that's
why I bought the covers.
That's funny. And you just put like a bank statement there.
Yeah, that's what it is. You know, to be honest, like there's things I'd like right now, but I'm not losing sleep over anything. So I feel like I'm getting the job done the way I want.
I think we all got to feel that way.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we talked about this.
Yep.
And then the classic distressor.
Yep.
Yeah. So what's that for? Again, you got Vox here?
Geez, yeah. Always, you know, vocals.
Everything.
My normal vocal chain is usually LA2A into the distressor. But I'll use it if I'm tracking drums. It could be on a snare drum, or it could be crushing a room mic.
Yeah.
It just gets used all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you see them everywhere. Have you tried their new plugin?
No, but I hear it's great.
Yeah, I've heard things.
Yeah.
I wouldn't know. And is this, so this would be like, this is a stereo compressor?
Yeah, this is the SSL-G compressor out of their G series consoles.
Right.
And that is either on the mix bus, it's either on the drum bus. When I track, I use it quite a bit. So
you'll use it on a bus when you're tracking?
All the time.
Okay.
Yeah, I use that on I like it on piano. I like it on my room mics. It gets used a lot.
Yeah. That's cool. All right, take us through this here.
This is the Alicia Compressor.
Okay.
And it is. Oh, sorry. This is the X-Presser. The M-Presser is the bigger one.
Okay.
So this is a smaller version of their sort of flagship compressor.
Yeah.
It's amazing. In my mind, it's kind of like a cleaner version of a distressor in a way.
Oh, really?
Because it is so versatile. There's so many features on it, and you can get so many different sounds out of it. There's a lot of functions on it that I haven't even experimented with that much.
Yeah.
And it's like there's gain reduction. Like there's just interesting things like gain reduction limiting. So you can say, I want to be really aggressive with the gain reduction, but the gain reduction limiting will make sure that you never go past a certain point. So you're like, oh, I want to take off 15 dB on room mics, but I don't ever want it to go to 20.
Oh, wow.
So
That's cool.
So you can stop it from doing that.
Yeah.
It does have a mix feature, which is great. It has an inverted ratio when you go further. So it'll work like a weird expander.
Yeah.
That I haven't messed
How
around with too
often
much.
do you use the mix feature?
Quite a bit.
Yeah.
But not as much as I fool around with it.
Okay.
If you understand what I mean. Like I'll always try it out.
Yeah.
If I want to do something aggressive, like on the Wildlife record, I remember using it there because we wanted the piano to have like a bit of pumping on it and be like a really aggressive sort of rock piano sound. But whenever I did that, it lost the attack.
Right.
So that's when I just started dialing. I went crazy with the ratio and everything, but then I dialed back the mix so that you'd still get the initial transient, but you'd also still get that kind of sucking sound.
Do you think that more outboard equipment should have a mix knob?
Yeah, I would.
Yeah.
I definitely think so.
Yeah,
I'd like another Apollo just so that I can get more channels and do more parallel processing, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Because I've read this a lot, and I do find it to be true, is that anytime I parallel process in the box, I notice phase things or something gets out of time a little bit, and it really irritates me.
Right.
Whereas if I do that outside the computer, it's like, it's the way it's supposed to be.
Yeah. That's cool. What's next to it here?
So that's an 1176.
Oh, okay.
So that's another do-it-yourself kit from Hairball.
Okay, yeah, I've heard of
And
them.
this is supposed to be their like blue stripe.
Okay, nice.
That one I did build, and it sounds awesome.
Yeah.
It's pretty, like, it's a real aggressive sound.
Yeah.
So, snare drums, if I really want to sort of stomp on a vocal.
Yeah.
The distressor is actually more polite than that is.
Right.
So I can get even more aggressive, or a bass guitar can... it's just really fast. It grabs really nicely.
Will you use it in mixing or
More
tracking?
So, no, I will track with that. But it's usually more used in mixing because of its aggressiveness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. That's cool. And then
The 525
API compressor. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just a beautiful sounding, thicker compressor.
I love the API stuff.
Some guys talk about getting into it and really using it aggressively. I haven't found that yet. But I do use it constantly.
Right,
And I do find that it's a really great way to, like, it's not so much the individual instruments as if I find that there's sounds that are kind of poking through, and the high end is just a little bit much, like an electric guitar that might be a little aggressive in the top end.
Yeah.
I just find throwing that on there a little bit. The other thing that's nice about it, for that specific problem, is it does have a de-essing feature.
Oh, cool. Okay.
So you can get it to just side chain onto the high end.
Yeah.
So something like a picked telly,
right.
Something like that. I
Yep.
can really kind of just dial it in and soften things up.
Cool. That's
And then 4 1073s.
Yeah, I just got one of these.
That's right.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
They're great. Thank you. Well, yeah, I mean, it's like now it's like, oh crap, I need 2 or 3 more. But yeah, it's just like a whole new level. It's a whole new level. It's so beautiful. And they're a great company too. Like, really nice people. And and everyone's talking about it. Like, it just seems like
they were like a no-brainer for me. I used to own a pair of their rack-mounted full 1073s.
Yeah.
And then when I was making the transition into the space, I had to sell them off in order to afford other things.
Yeah.
Like, I was really dead set when I was designing the studio to get certain things right, and then other things would follow.
Right.
So, like, monitoring and
that's cool.
all that kind of stuff was the priority.
Yeah.
So I was like, if I get that right, I'll be able to mix better, and then eventually, hopefully, money starts rolling in, and I can start building the other things.
Well, that's smart.
I wanted the confidence in this. So
and are these your primary pre's?
always.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, they're so great. And so, what was because there are quite a few 1073 ways to go. What was the deciding factor?
I believe in this. Well, number one, I've used a lot of 1073s.
Yeah.
They sounded the closest or indistinguishable to me.
Yeah.
And I just believe in that company a lot.
Yeah,
like, everything they build is built like a tank. They seem to really prioritize the right things. Like Chandler, to me, and like Brent Averill are just 2 companies that are just make wicked units that are.
Have you
tanks.
used their API stuff? The black versions?
But I want that.
Yeah.
I really, really want that new black one.
Yeah.
It's set up like a 550, but it's supposed to be a bit navy as well.
Yeah.
And I saw that, and I've been drooling over it. Like, there's not many. Like, thanks.
Yeah. There you go.
Now I know what I'm doing.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll let you go ahead and buy it.
Yeah. And when my wife asks, I'll give her your number.
Yes, sure. Yeah. She can talk to my wife.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Actually, my wife is probably not going to want me to be doing these things because I'm going to come home with a whole new list.
The whole new list. It's like, I heard this is awesome.
Yeah. I saw that they have like a 312 version.
Yep.
And they've also just come up with like a graphic EQ.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, like the 560. Yeah.
That I'm interested in. I really like the 560 a lot.
Yeah, I've never used one.
And the price point, I find that's like the best bang for buck out of the API stuff.
Oh, really?
Yeah, like the 560 is awesome. It's not as versatile, obviously, but what it does to like a kick drum or snare drums, it just kills them. It's so good.
Yeah. No, it's great stuff. This is really cool. Actually, the company was really nice because the unit I got, I was testing it out and I couldn't get any phantom power to it. And so I was trying all these different things, and then I pressed the DI button and I got phantom power. And so I looked online and the switches were wrong.
Oh.
And so I was like, oh, what am I going to do? And I didn't want to take it over the rack and return it and wait for another one to come in stock. And so I messaged the company on Instagram, and somebody got back to me right away and said, hey, listen, if you don't mind, take a pair of pliers with a cloth, pull it out, and switch them.
Switch them, yeah.
And I was like, oh man, I don't know if I can do this. So I grabbed pliers and like a felt cloth, and I was like shaking.
Yeah.
And it just came out. It was super easy.
Good, yeah.
So it was great.
And that's nice when a company is willing to let you do things and they're being realistic about it.
Oh yeah. Exactly. No, it wasn't like head office. It wasn't like their PR company.
Yeah, no, the only person authorized to touch this thing is our guy that's out in wherever. No, that's a waste.
So over here, we should get moving here. So the Apollo, you've been the Apollo for a while, eh?
I love it.
Yeah, it's just such
I had
such
gone
an
through
investment.
so many different converters and interfaces and all this stuff.
And this is the most
it was
recent,
driving me nuts for a long time because I would be mixing and then I'd print a mix and I'd listen back and be like, what the hell?
Really?
What is this? Like, this is not what I was. And then the silver face I really liked, and that was pretty close. But then when I got these black ones, I was like, this
really, they really
might even be better. Like,
upgraded it that much, eh?
I felt they did.
Yeah.
You know, other people have opinions on that, but
no.
I hear what I hear.
Yeah, for sure. Well, that's the funny thing too. I mean, you've been at this for so long, and I see some people say online when they compare like a $200 unit with a $2,000 unit, they say, I don't hear a difference. Yeah. And sometimes I think, and I agree with them, sometimes I don't hear a difference, but I think, is that the units or is that your ears?
Yeah,
like
I
maybe,
think so.
You know what I mean? Like maybe we should be kind of slow to critique because maybe we're just not there yet.
And it's also, the other thing too is that I find that you can't have a strong opinion on a lot of these things with just like this isolated little listen. Because, like I might have heard, because, there's just sort of even when you buy a new piece of gear, there's your honeymoon phase.
Yeah.
And you're like, this is the best thing ever. And then 2 months later, you're like, I don't use this thing anymore.
Yeah.
So that's even with that much time.
Yeah.
I find that with converters and stuff, after you put it through its paces and you record a full record and then you mix that record and you listen back and you've printed mixes and you've printed stems and you've really started to hear how it works.
Yeah.
That's when you got a really good opinion on it. And I think it's very hard to just be like, well, I recorded some guitars and they sounded better than this. It's like,
yeah, no, that's cool. Give me some advice here. I'm at the stage where it's not, we talked earlier about gear that's not fun to buy. Yeah. And I find like a converter is not really that fun because I can convert analog to digital at the moment. Yeah. But I find it more fun to get more of these.
Of course it is.
So, but should I? Should I upgrade or should I keep buying more?
Well, that was the thing with like monitors for me, right?
Yeah, right.
Is that monitors are kind of in that, they're on the fringe of that, but they're not the sexiest thing to buy. They're not a microphone. They're not a cool reverb.
Yeah.
They're not some weird,
guitar pedal or a guitar
or anything. Yeah. But at the end of the day, for me, I thought about it like this: everything bottlenecks.
Yes.
So you can have 1,000 things that do cool things, but it's going to bottleneck, and that bottleneck is you being able to get other people to listen to it and for you to do your job properly. Right. So I thought there's certain things that necessitate, sort of get you to have cool ideas, and then there's other things that just allow you to do your job and deliver what you're getting paid for. So that's why I feel like conversion, this sort of mix setup and things like spending way too much on speakers. Yeah. It's like, that to me was sort of like all this other shit is extra. I need to be able to hear what's coming out of the speakers and be able to reproduce what's going on in that room in a really effective way. And then I can start shaping the sound. My first goal is to make sure that I'm doing my job right. And that I'm not going to be like sending people mixes and them being like, what the fuck is this? Yeah. I wanted those things to be, that's what's going to make me pro. The rest of the stuff is going to be interesting and start to develop that. But that's what's going to allow me to say, no, I can mix this.
Nice. Yeah. No, that's cool. What do we got down here? I'm always kind of curious about what these are. Are these pre's? Or?
Yeah, they're channel strips from a Ward Beck console. Okay. So these were sort of the first units I got when I started to downsize and had to invest in the room and a bunch of other things.
After the board?
After the board, yeah. And I needed a bunch of pre's. I didn't have a ton of money at the time. And, Ward Becks, I think, are sort of the Canadian best bang for your buck that you can get. They're built like tanks. They sound decent. I don't think they sound nearly as good as that, but they sound really good. Right. And I think I got all of these unracked I traded a transient designer. An $800 piece, and I got. Wow. And where can you? The Arts, which sound terrible, are $50 each.
Yeah.
So these things were $100 each, and they sound fantastic. So that was sort of it. And then I got Tristan over at Catherine North to rack them up. And they were, I made a lot of things just with these 8 preamps. And then eventually I was like, I want to upgrade into the Brent Avrils.
Right. So you still use these now?
All the time. Yeah,
that's cool.
Yeah, anytime that I'm doing like a full band session or drums, they're used.
Yeah,
and I never worry about it.
Is there any EQ on it? Or
no?
No.
Well, there's high pass, low pass.
Okay, yeah, some
that
filters.
kind of stuff. But most of this is sends.
Oh, okay.
So really, the only thing I use is this knob right here. That's it. That one knob.
That's funny.
I make sure it's on.
Yeah.
And then I use that knob, and then I'll use pad.
That's funny.
Yeah.
People who don't know anything about gear or something, and they're like, "Do you use all those knobs, or do they actually do something?"
Yeah,
In that case, no.
No, nothing.
This is a like a spring.
Yeah, that's the AKG BX10 spring.
Okay.
And that's just a great reverb.
Cool.
That gets used always.
Yeah.
Everything.
Yeah. Cool. And the Space Echo.
Space Echo, of course.
So let's talk about tape here.
Yep.
You know what? We were just at Dan Edmonds' place, and he's big into tape, and I love it, but I don't get it. I don't understand it.
For me, I got into tape. I mean, you can work without a tape machine. There's no doubt. Lots of records are made without it. But for me, it was like, number one, most of the records I really like were cut to tape.
Right.
So that was just an easy one. It's like, be like those guys, right? Do what they do. But the other thing for me is that, like, it's when I record a drum set, this automatically gives me saturation, compression, and a bunch of tone on every channel. Right. So for me to record a drum set and do that with other pieces of gear, like try to get some saturation or some harmonics, because that's what this is. This is a harmonic generator for me.
Right.
So because you're getting all that extra harmonic information in it, all the sounds become enriched. They sound bigger. They sound more beautiful to me. They sound just better. So if I were to try to do that thing with like tubes or transformers and other pieces of gear, my investment would be astronomical.
Right.
Whereas this was like, not that much money. It was $5,000. I had to get it serviced a bit, but it allowed me to be able to track a full band and have all that great color and all that great tone in just recording.
Yeah. Yeah.
Without having to go nuts with different choices or whatever.
So real quick, what's the process then? A mic goes into a pre and then compression or EQ?
Usually compression
Something like
and EQ.
That? Okay.
Usually EQ, then compression. And then I'll hit the tape machine.
Yeah.
And then usually fill up the tape machine with a bunch of takes, and then we'll dump it all over to Pro Tools.
Oh, okay. Okay, cool. Again, we were talking about how much we're out of time here, but these are new as well, the Barefoots. Yeah, these. Talk to me about those.
I had been using a pair of speakers called Spiral Grooves for a while, and I think they're phenomenal. And I'd also been sort of working with the Dyne Audio 15 BM15As. And I've been working between them, and they both had really great qualities that I liked, and I was able to kind of get results that I was feeling pretty confident with and I could rely on. Yeah. And then I just sort of wanted to go that next level, and I just wanted to not have to compromise in any way with the way I was listening back to things. Yeah. And that's them. Nice. They're by far the best thing I'd ever listened to music on. So, and I trust them. Yeah. And they kind of do the qualities of both of those separately. Yeah. I feel like this just does in one speaker. That's cool. Yeah.
Do they need an amp or are they powered?
No, they're powered. And they weigh a ton.
Yeah.
They look very heavy. Yeah.
Okay, so give me a little mic tour here.
So the Coles 4038s.
These are ribbons?
Ribbons.
And are these
classic, tried and true, right?
What are you doing with these? Overheads, rooms?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Guitar amp.
Yeah.
Backup vocals, like if I have a choir or if I have several people.
Okay, cool.
String quartet, those types of things.
What's been so great? What's so great about ribbons? Why are they coming back? Does it have anything to do with digital?
I think it absolutely does. Yeah.
You think it just smooths things out a bit?
Yeah, smooths things out. And they just have such a nice dark quality. I don't think it's so much that I just think every mic has a sort of an application, and I think that generally, you could say it's because of digital, and I would say that condensers became so popular because of tape. Right. People wanted a faster, brighter sound. With tape technology that was darker and hissier. That's an 87.
87, okay. Yeah. Cool. Is this your primary?
Yeah, for vocals. Yeah. Almost only vocals. Like I do use it on a drum kit. I will use it on guitar sometimes, but it's primarily vocals.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
And what do we have here? I've never seen this before.
This is the Lawson 251.
Okay.
So it's the same as the Elam 251. It's a clone of it.
Okay.
That gets used a lot. It's brighter than the 87, so I will use it on vocals, and it sounds amazing on it. But if I'm just cutting vocals, I usually use that. But if I'm doing I usually only use one mic when somebody's playing an acoustic and singing.
Okay.
Just because of phase and everything.
Yeah.
So I'll rely more on mic placement. But that's a great mic for that.
You can do that with the M7 too, right?
Yeah. That's right.
Cool.
And then just fill out the rest of the space.
Bigger. Yeah.
But I would use the Coles as room mics in that situation potentially.
Cool.
But yeah, an upright bass. It kills it. So those three applications, but primarily the fact that I can just set that up in front of somebody that's doing an acoustic track. I use that on acoustic guitar constantly, and it kills it.
Well, I got something funny to tell you. I was doing acoustic guitar for Timid the Brave a couple weeks ago, and I've recorded acoustic guitar my whole life because I'm an acoustic guitarist, but I'm never happy with acoustic guitar sound, and so I thought, how am I going to mic up an acoustic guitar this time? So I went to your Instagram, and I went to the last time that you were miking up an acoustic guitar, and I actually screenshotted it. And then went up to the studio and placed my mics, one kind of up over the body here and one down here, and it sounded great.
Oh, cool.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
I'll send you a check.
Yeah. So I really like that. I'll usually use the 87 and the 251 on guitars, but if I do want something to be a little darker, I could potentially use the two Coles or a Coles and a 57.
Yeah.
I always like 57s on guitars as well, like acoustics.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, cool. What else we got? Some fun stuff in here?
Yeah, not as much. The Bayer M160 is great.
Oh, okay.
That's another ribbon.
Yeah.
Drum overhead.
Electrics.
Yeah, electrics.
Yeah.
That's really what it does. Percussion, I think it really does a good job of that.
That's cool.
What do I got in here?
What do you use the SM7s for? Because I have one, and I'm never sure exactly what.
Well, vocals.
Yeah.
I actually record. I use this more on guitar amps than I do a 57.
Really?
And I really, really like it.
Why is that?
A little thicker and a little softer on the high end.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
that's cool.
I just find that it captures the tone and enriches it a bit more.
I heard that people are doing that on snare as well instead of a 57.
The only problem with that on snare is that the bleed is this bleeds a little more than a 57.
Right.
So I would do that if the drummer's really tempered.
Right.
And I'd have no problem doing that. But if I got to be relying on each individual mic to really do its job,
that makes sense.
Then I would be a little reluctant to do that. These guys, the KM184s.
Oh, man.
These little Neumann guys.
Yeah.
They're amazing.
I got a funny story about those. We were up at, when we did the Good Hunters record, and this was about 5-6 years ago, before I knew anything about gear at all.
Yeah.
And Jeff went to rent some mics for our weekend. We went up to this cottage out in the country, and he got two 184s for overheads and for recording some outdoor stuff. And I had no idea what they were worth. I should have known they were worth a lot of money because they cost us an arm and a leg just to rent them for the week.
Did.
And we were doing this live video outside around a campfire, and the guys were jamming live. And I thought, let's bring these two mics up and put them up high. And so I did, and we had this huge campfire going. And then we returned them. The mics were fine. But years later, when I realized what we had, had they been mine, I would have never put them up over a campfire.
No.
Anyway, you live and learn. They weren't mine. Luckily.
They weren't. Yeah, that's it. Yeah. Long McQuaid. Ignore this.
Yeah.
And then old actual German AKG-D12.
Yeah. Cool.
And that's kick drums. This is also I should also say bass cabs.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Always. So pretty much any guitar amp of any sort, I usually use this.
Yeah, that's cool. Well, listen, the stuff you do sounds great.
I appreciate it.
This is a really, really cool place.
Thank you.
It's just, what I love about it, and just following you on Instagram for so long, is that you've really customized it for what you do, and I think that's pretty cool.
Thank you.
You just kind of slowly it's become yours. And I think that's what's cool about studios that are not big commercial facilities, is that the studios represent the producer. They represent the engineer. This is Mike's place.
Yeah, they take on that life. Yeah. And it's an extension. So.
Yeah. Cool. Thanks,
awesome.
man.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Take care.
Thanks, buddy. Thanks, Jake.